All right, Leah, I see us at 1 o'clock, and I'm just checking attendance for our quorum. I'm not sure who might have just joined, but I was counting 5. Are you counting the same?
I am. We need 2 more. I'll start rapid texting. Stand by.
Hi, this is Nicole. I actually count 7.
Leave it to our accountant. Hold on, let's see.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
5.
Oh, 6. Sorry, I saw Adriana Fisher and I saw Adra. My bad. We got 6.
And I know 1 is going to be delayed. We'll count you, Adriana.
I think Tyler just joined, making us
Yes,
full.
Tyler just joined, so we are at 7. We've got our quorum. So let's go ahead and call the meeting to order at 1:02. And we will move on to roll call. So Eric Davis.
Here.
Tyler Denham.
Here.
Nicole Ellman.
Here.
I know Karen will be joining us shortly. She's on a little bit of a delay. Sandy Flores.
I'm here.
And I am here. Devonna McLaughlin.
I'm here.
Jackie Kellogg.
I'm here.
We know Moses will not be able to join us today. Adra is not on yet. And Ross Schaefer. I don't see her in the chat either, so we'll hope either of those two might be able to join us in a bit. We are down to item 3 on our agenda, which is public comment. At this time, any member of the public may address the commission on any subject within our jurisdiction that is not scheduled before the commission today. Due to open meeting laws, the commission cannot discuss or act on items presented during this portion of the agenda. To address the commission on an item that is on the agenda, we would just ask for you to please wait for myself to call for public comment at the time that item is heard. Leah, do we have any public comment today?
I'm checking email right now and there's nothing in my inbox. So thank you, Chair.
Okay, so seeing none, we'll move on to item 4, which is the approval of our minutes. We're going to consider and approve the minutes from our meeting on January 27th, and I am happy to entertain a motion on that.
So move. This is Nicole.
Thank you,
Seconded.
Nicole.
This is Sandy.
Thank you, Sandy. So we have a motion from Nicole and a second from Sandy. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? That then carries. Thank you all. I'm guessing this might be a typo, Leah. It says to approve the minutes of November 29th, or had we missed that?
No, that's a typo, Chair. I will correct that. So it reads properly. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. So we are down to item 5, which is our general business, and item A is the introduction of our new commissioner, Jackie Kellogg.
Hello.
Do you want to take a moment to introduce yourself? We have your bio, but I'd love if you would like to share anything with us.
I'm not big on public speaking. Hi, I'm Jackie. I'm a small business owner in Flagstaff, and I just wanted to join the commission and see how I could help with our
We are
house.
certainly, absolutely. We're so glad to have you joining us.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to item 6, which is our discussion items. Item A is the Active Transportation Master Plan, and I will turn it over to you, Leah.
Thank you, Chair. So this presentation is coming before you at the request of our Vice Mayor. As we were going through the housing plan, she made a great point. She said, let's get Martin in front of the Housing Commission and talk about Flagstaff's Active Transportation Master Plan. So Martin Ince is our multimodal transportation planner. I think I have that title right, Martin. I'm going to hand it over to you. Here's our fabulous Housing Commission, and thanks for presenting to us today.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Chair House and members of the Commission for making a little time for me on your agenda. I've got a short presentation. Well, I hope it's short. I've been making this presentation to other city boards and commissions over the past couple of months. So I'm gonna kind of move through it a little bit quickly. I try to include a few slides about that relate transportation to whatever the focuses of that particular commission is that I'm presenting to. So I've got a couple of thoughts about transportation and housing, and I want to spend a few minutes. I think that's kind of an interesting connection. So I want to spend a few minutes on those slides. I'm going to try to move through the rest of it a little bit more quickly than usual. And then hopefully we'll have some time. You'll have thought of some really difficult and uncomfortable questions for me by the end of the presentation to ask that I can fumble through. Anyway, so my name is Martin Ince. As Leah said, I'm the multimodal transportation planner for the city. That essentially means I do transportation planning, but really kind of active modes like walking and biking, and even a little bit of interaction with transit. I'm here to present on the city's draft Active Transportation Master Plan, which henceforward we'll refer to as the ATMP for brevity, and it is essentially a guide for enhancing walking and biking in Flagstaff. And over the years, the city has adopted a number of plans and policy documents, really beginning with the regional plan that indicates support for walking and biking. But for the most part, those plans don't have a lot of detail in them. So the ATMP is intended to provide guidance and direction and more detail than the other plans have provided in the past. This slide gives you an idea of the contents of the document, different chapters, and it really kind of is organized from the more general to the more specific. So a few of the early chapters include things like goals and policies, which tend to be high level and aspirational. And then we get down into things like strategies and actions. So the specific things we can do. Outcomes are the things, how we want Flagstaff to end up. Then implementation, of course, is how we get there. And
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm not seeing your slides. I'm not sure if anyone else is.
Oh, I'm so sorry. After a year of doing this, you'd think I'd have sharing screens down more, Pat. How's that?
There we go.
All right. So here were the. I'm so sorry. Here were the ones you missed. And here's where we are, which is the kind of the outline of the document. Thank you for interrupting me. I would have gone on blindly, just yammering away until not realizing that you weren't even seeing my slides. Okay, so anyway, so this is the outline of the document. Again, it goes from kind of the more general to the more specific. The last two items on the list are kind of appendices or attachments to the document that could get into even more detail about planning considerations and design guidance for walking and biking, and then recommendations for infrastructure facilities that we need to support walking and biking. If you are familiar with the city's carbon neutrality plan, you may have heard of the phrase or the terminology, the big shift. And actually it is quoted in your housing plan as well, which I think it was taken from the carbon neutrality plan. But the big shift is really a different way of looking at transportation planning. And I've listed a couple of the principles that make up the big shift. First one being that we want to be more transformational than incremental. So it's kind of the time for bold action and not proceeding in small steps, but taking big steps, being ambitious. The second principle is that we emphasize pedestrians and bicyclists, and kind of by default transit as well, and don't overbuild facilities for vehicles. We know that when we plan for peds and bikes, that we support walking and biking. The third one is to take a well-rounded approach to transportation. And here we don't just consider the movement of vehicles, but we consider multiple community objectives and values. And those objectives or those values might include environmental protection, sustainability, public or community health, sustainability, neighborhood preservation or protection, and other things. So we really take a very broad look of transportation and how it interacts with other things. And then the final principle or the final point is that we pursue a wide range of solutions for mobility. So the idea is that we want to provide people with a lot of different options for getting around. So if we want people to walk or bike or take the bus, not everyone has those as good options. Not every trip is a good walking trip or a good biking trip. But when people do have a good option, we want them to be able to choose those. And we know in Flagstaff that if we provide people with a lot of options, that they will appreciate that and that they'll use those options. We know there's a lot of people in Flagstaff that want to walk, that want to take their bike, and we want to make sure that that is possible and that they have that choice before them in how they get around. Policy support is simply the high-level acknowledgement and support for walking and biking. There are already goals and policies in the regional plan related to transportation in general and walking and biking specifically. So we're not rewriting those. We're not taking the city in a different direction. We're simply providing more detail for the policies that are already there. Strategies and actions are all the things that we can do. We have a long list of them in the draft plan, and they are organized around 6 different topics. That includes infrastructure, maintenance and operations, support and encouragement, safety, transportation and land use planning, and then finally evaluation. Just a couple of words about ped and bike infrastructure. These are the facilities that we need. We have a long list of prioritized projects that generally include sidewalks, bikeways, foot trails, street crossings, and bridges and tunnels for peds and bikes. And we have prioritized and organized them into a 20-year program of projects that will be funded out of 2 main sources. The first being the transportation sales tax, also known as Prop 419, which was approved by the voters in 2018. And over the course of 20 years, will provide $29 million for ped and bike projects. And the second source is a first last mile grant from Mountain Line that we'll use for enhancing ped and bike facilities in the vicinity of transit lines and transit stops. We've gone further and have incorporated or included the highest priority projects into the city's 5-year capital program. So we have a list of what projects we want to build over the next 5 years. And that process that's kind of detailed there in the bullet points takes us from kind of an idea to planning to programming to construction and having things on the ground in kind of one seamless process. And I've included a link to an online map. This was not included in the packet that was sent to you, but I'm going to see if I can put that in the chat. So if you want to take a look at it, it's kind of an interactive map where you can turn layers off and on, and you can see some of the projects that we have planned over the next 20 years for peds and bikes. And I got a couple of slides just to give you an idea of what the facilities look like or where they're located. First one shows sidewalks and crossings. We have 58 miles of missing sidewalks on major streets. This does not include local neighborhood streets. And we've identified 59 places for enhanced crossings. And this is generally what that looks like. So the sidewalks here are in red. And these are all the ones that are missing on major, this is where we don't have sidewalks on major streets. And then the blue dots are places where we've identified where it would be it'd be beneficial to have a at-grade street crossing. Bikeways plan is intended to be low stress, so very comfortable and would feel very safe for most riders. And you can see that last bullet point, we intend to appeal to a segment of the population that is referred to as interested but concerned. In other words, they're interested in taking more trips by bike, but they're concerned about safety and comfort. And so when we make things feel more safe and more comfortable, they're more likely to ride their bike. This gives you an idea of what it looks like. It's organized around a hierarchy. So what's shown in dark blue and purple are the primary and secondary bike routes, and they would make up kind of the backbone of the system. So if you're going cross town or from home to school or home to work or wherever it may be, this is likely the routes that you would use. It also helps us prioritize bikeways for maintenance and snow removal and things like that, because we know that the primary and secondary ones are the ones that we want done first. The FOOTS plan includes kind of the basic 58 miles of existing, 76 additional miles planned, but it also looks at a number of other facilities and kind of ancillary things that help enhance access to the system and promote or enhance the connectivity between our trail system and other trails in the region, including the recreational single tracks around the perimeter of Flagstaff. So here's the basic FOOTS trail, what's existing and planned. And then if we layer in all the other kind of facilities, and again, if you want to get more detail on this, I'd encourage you to look at the link that I put in the chat, and you can kind of scroll around and get more detail about all these potential facilities. So that brings us to the couple slides I have that talk about transportation and housing. And the first one is the housing plus transportation index. And I don't know, I really can't see anybody, so I guess I really can't ask for a show of hands, but are you familiar with the H+T index? Has that come up in your discussion before? Generally? Anyway.
No, but I'm pretty familiar with the concept.
Okay. I mean, it's pretty simple. It's really just the combination of housing and transportation as a percentage of a household's income. And it really is intended to be a broader look at housing affordability, given that housing is one source of funds, but how the cost of transporting yourself is another. And transportation, as it says here in the second bullet point, is typically a household's second largest expenditure. So when you combine the two, it can be a significant part. Well, here we see if housing is the benchmark, or the goal is that housing be no more than 30% of a household's income. H+T, or the transportation component, should be no more than 45%. And I don't know, this may be kind of an outdated concept, but in the old days, they used to talk about driving till you qualify to buy a house. And of course, the flip side of that is if you have a very long commute or a very long drive, that adds significantly to your cost of transportation and makes the housing actually less affordable. So the relationship here is really quite simple. You know, if we can help reduce transportation costs by giving people more options for getting around, then that helps that H+T index and actually can make housing more affordable. So I'll pause there for a moment and see if there's anybody has any questions or comments about that particular aspect, or that really very direct connection between transportation and housing.
If anyone has any comments or questions, please feel free to drop a C or a Q in the chat. I forgot to mention that earlier, so thanks for the pause.
All right, I'm just gonna have a quick drink of water.
Is the 45% there on the benchmark saying that you expect households to spend 45% of income on transportation?
Yeah, I think I believe it's sort of indicated as an upper end. Like if you're spending more than 45% on H+T, then you're kind of getting into the danger zone.
Oh, okay. That's for the cumulative total.
Yeah.
Housing, 30%, familiar with that benchmark. And then housing plus transportation benchmark is 45%, is what that's saying.
Yeah, I believe so. If my math is correct, that would make transportation to be 15% of a household's income.
And that's kind of what I've heard too. transportation is usually the second biggest expense right behind housing.
Yeah. Actually, if you're interested, there's a group from Chicago called the Center for Neighborhood Technology, and they have published a nationwide map on the H+T index, so you can enter an address or a zip code and see what the H+T index is for that particular. I think they do it by census block group. So Flagstaff is broken up into a handful of smaller areas. I mean, it's kind of interesting. I think anytime that data is collected at a national level like that, made into these sort of general indicators, you lose a little bit of precision at the local level, but it's still kind of interesting to look at. So a couple. There it is. Thank you, Jen. A couple other thoughts about transportation, and I think the other big one is really related to equity. And I think equity kind of transcends all the things that we talk about, but I think there is a particular very focused aspect of it related to transportation and the connection between transportation and housing. So our principle, or our general thought, is that better transportation options improve mobility for all segments of Flagstaff's population. And here's a couple of examples of that. We estimate that about a third of the population does not drive at all. That includes, of course, children under the age of 16 who can't get a license and have to rely on their parents. It includes people who cannot get a driver's license. It includes people who have, for legal reasons, have had to forfeit their driver's license, and it includes people that, for whatever reason, do not drive, whether it be affordability or just a choice. So for that, if it's a third or less than that or more than that, whatever that segment of the population is, they really rely on other transportation options. They can't rely on a personal vehicle to get around. So for them, other options are really essential. And that kind of feeds into the second point, which is that not everyone can afford to drive. You can find various things online that estimate the annual cost of owning and operating and maintaining a new car is anywhere from $8,000 to $12,000 per year. So that's a fairly significant chunk out of a household's income. And if we can reduce that, of course, the best way to reduce it is to reduce the number of vehicles you have. But if there are other ways to reduce how much you have to use a car and can reduce that amount that's spent on transportation, the more that supports equity and transportation mobility for everyone. The third point is in regard to seniors and having a variety of good transportation options helps them age in place. So when seniors can access goods and services and amenities in their neighborhood and not have to worry about moving once they get older and are unable to drive or can drive less if they can stay where they are. And then the final point is that when we provide good transportation options, that eliminates a barrier for low-income people to participation in the workforce. So, people have to be able to get to their jobs, and if that is a difficulty because of your income status, then providing more low-cost transportation options is a way to get around that. On transportation in neighborhoods, I think there's a lot of evidence and research that walking and biking helps support vibrant neighborhoods. Walking and biking promote street level activity and vitality that really adds to neighborhood life. Walking and biking give you kind of an intimate view or perspective of your neighborhood and promote interaction and engagement with your neighbors in a way that being in a vehicle just cannot. Walking and biking gives us access to goods and services that are close by, and it also gives us access to amenities in our neighborhood, to parks, open space, forest, and all the trails around Flagstaff. And anybody who's lived in Flagstaff for any period of time knows that access to open space and access to the forest is a significant community value. And that should be enjoyed by everyone in the community, regardless of your income status or the neighborhood you live in, or anything else. And then, of course, there's a flip side to that as well, that transportation projects that are poorly designed or executed or don't think about these things can disproportionately impact disadvantaged neighborhoods. And of course, there's probably a 50, 60, 70-year history of this phenomenon with transportation projects that is easy to, well documented and easy to look up. I think in Flagstaff it happens in more subtle ways, but I think it happens just the same. We don't see things like Robert Moses building elevated intersections through the middle of historic neighborhoods, but there are other ways that can occur. So always need to be mindful of how we're designing and implementing transportation projects and who they benefit and who they may impact. And then just a couple of other considerations that I think relate back to housing. One is that dense mixed-use compact development patterns really promote walking, biking, and transit. And I think having walking, biking, and transit as part of those development patterns really bring them to their full potential. Of course, we're moving in that direction in Flagstaff in the core area, and I think we already have empirical evidence of how that promotes, how walking and biking is promoted when we build neighborhoods that are more dense and compact. Second point, these are just kind of random thoughts that I had at the end that didn't fit well into other categories, but walking and biking and transit are mutually supportive. So most transit trips begin with a walking or biking trip. And if we have good facilities for walking and biking, that extends the area that people can get to transit. I think their transit shed, I think that's a concept, but the area that transit serves gets bigger when we have good walking and biking facilities. And then if you walk or bike and we have a good transit system that encourages you to walk and bike more. For example, if you walk to work or ride your bike to work in the morning and by afternoon it's raining or snowing or the weather's turned bad or you're just not feeling it or whatever, and you have the option of taking transit home, then that kind of safety net, that option to take transit home makes you more likely to bike or walk in the first place in the morning. Third point there, walking and biking helps mitigate the impacts of student housing. This, of course, has been a much talked about issue in Flagstaff over the last couple of years, as we've seen some fairly significant student housing projects go in. And to the extent that they're kind of centrally located and the students who live there are able to walk or take transit or bike to campus or for their daily needs, that really reduces the impact on our transportation system and congestion on the roadways, to be perfectly straightforward. And then the final point, and I think this is really significant, but walking and biking reduces the land that we need for streets, roadways, and parking. And that allows that land to be used for something else that may potentially be more productive, including some of the density. It could be amenities, it could be open space, it could be additional housing units, whatever it is, whether we know it or whether we understand it and acknowledge it or not, like we make a decision between whether we have a lot of roadway facilities, a lot of land taken up by roadway and parking, or whether we have land taken up by development and housing and commercial space. So I'll take another pause here. I will say that when you start to think about these things, I think it's easy to keep going, and it's kind of easy to see how all these things are really sort of interconnected. And I'm talking about transportation, housing, land use, open space, access to nature. And in fact, if you look at page 42 of your housing plan, there's kind of a little diagram that is in kind of a fan shape that talks about all these different aspects of a community and how they're interconnected. And I like that little diagram. I think I would refer to it as the big theory of everything, and then the nature of how everything is really interconnected, and how when we introduce benefits or something positive in one field, it can have benefits in a number of those topics that go around that fan. So I said I was going to pause and then I didn't, but I'll pause and see if there's any, if you have any thoughts or comments or questions, or if there's anything I missed in that relationship between transportation and housing.
I
So as a reminder for folks that have comments or questions, if you can put a C or a Q in the comment box so we can call on you. But Tyler, you can go ahead.
I put a comment in the comment box just to be thorough. Yeah, I'm glad that you're giving this presentation. I agree with you that there's a lot of connections between transportation policy and housing. One thing that I've always focused on is that people need to be close to amenities for them to walk or bike to them. And if you want to have a lot of people walking and biking to amenities, then you need to increase your housing density. Otherwise, your pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, if there's no proximity between amenities and people, is really just a recreation space. And while nice recreation spaces are a laudable goal in and of itself, I think and it sounds like you and a lot of other people really want to see more from Flagstaff. So I've heard of like two different approaches towards getting the density needed to support walking and biking. So one, you can like increase urban density around amenity rich areas, or two, you could allow small scale amenities to move into residential neighborhoods. I think there's actually a whole movement built around this concept called complete neighborhoods. And I'm just curious if any of these concepts are featured prominently in the current draft of the active transportation map. And I actually have a really good some empirical research to share. I just posted an image in this chat. So I've seen this research paper before, and what it shows is that the probability of people walking to a destination drops off greatly when you get past like 1 kilometer. So people need to be close to amenities if you want them to walk to them. So yeah, just curious, like if these concepts, if they feature in the current draft.
Yeah, a very good question. Given that there's a close relationship between land use and active transportation, walking and biking, and really that relationship I think is best expressed in the city's regional plan. And there's a lot of information there, or more information, I should say, about it, and really more guidance on how to do mixed use, more dense, more compact land use. So in the context of the ATMP, I don't think it was really necessary. We didn't feel it was necessary to recreate that information that's already in the regional plan, but just sort of highlight the fact that walking and biking is more than just about providing a bike lane or a sidewalk or a foot trail. That one of the principal determinants is how we plan or how we are implementing land use. And so it refers back to the regional plan for that guidance, but just acknowledges that relationship exists and is very important. The city, is in the process of beginning to reconsider, like update the city's regional plan. And that's going to be a process over the next couple of years. But I think there's a really good opportunity to start talking about some of the points that you brought up, Tyler, and make sure that those are addressed, and make sure that relationship is clear in the plan, is kind of support for how we want to move forward with land use. I will just a couple other comments on your comments. Yes, walking really relies on pretty close proximity. And I mentioned we have some empirical data, and what it shows is that in the core of Flagstaff, a much higher percentage of trips are made by walking, biking, and transit than in the kind of the peripheral neighborhoods of Flagstaff. And so that provides direct evidence that when we do kind of when there's compact development and a lot of things occurring in the same area, that people are much more likely to walk or bike. Now, I think biking is a little bit different in that, you can go, if you can bike 4 miles in Flagstaff, you can pretty much get around to most destinations in town. So there it's not only proximity, but it's also the quality of the facilities that we provide. So people need continuous, comfortable, easy to navigate, intuitive routes if we're going to encourage them to bike. And that means a little bit less dependent on land use and more dependent on facilities, but just kind of a minor nuance. And I think I don't know that you were asking specific questions, but I was responding to a few of the things you said. Did I cover it all?
Yeah, yeah. And I would be curious. I read over the active transportation. I read over the draft like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I don't remember seeing a lot of language in there about, I think there's two different sections, little paragraphs that mention how density and compact urban form factor into walking and pedestrian activity.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess the straightforward question is there any plan to incorporate more of these concepts into the plan?
And some of the design guidance, which is not included in the draft that you saw, but could be either a subsequent appendix or information added on to the plan afterwards. Talks a little bit more specifically about walking and biking in the context of urban neighborhoods and suburban neighborhoods, and really expanding the discussion of walking and biking in some of the land use concepts talked about in the regional plan. So not creating new information that's already in the regional plan, but making it more specific for walking and biking. If you want, I can share that with you separately to give you kind of a flavor of how we address that.
Yeah, I'd be interested in that. It looks like someone else has a hand raised. I don't want to take too much time.
Yeah, I saw, was it Dan Folk? I see your hand raised if you'd like to go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. This is Dan Folk, Development Director. I think what Martin was kind of alluding to in the regional plan is we have these activity centers mapped, and activity centers are locations where we desire higher density, mixed use, all of these things that we're talking about. Ped sheds, it's a half-mile ped shed centered on a quarter mile each way. And so that's really our main tool in the regional plan, where we want to see higher density. Now, when you overlay the map of the activity centers, it's right on mountain lines, I forget what they call it, but their permanent system, right? Where they consider their backbone system. And so we've coordinated the activity centers with I think the mountain line activity. If you look at Martin's main map, where he's got the main routes that you would get around on bike and ped, they're going to line up all with these activity centers. So I think what Martin is trying to say is, rather than replicate what's in the regional plan, which there's lots of things in the regional plan about density and why we need density in certain locations. I think that's what he was trying to get at. Thank you.
Thank you. Were there any other comments or questions? If not, then I think you're good to go on.
All right, I've just got a couple of slides left. I'll skip through them pretty quickly. I did want to mention regarding community engagement and public review. Really, we've been working on this plan for a number of years, and over those years, we've done a handful of surveys. We've talked to a lot of people about walking and biking. So I think we've gotten a lot of really good information from the community and given them an opportunity to kind of weigh in on how they think about walking and biking. We do have one survey up specifically related to the draft plan. And really our intention for public engagement at this point is to go back to the community and ask them, did we hear you correctly? Are we kind of getting it right? Are we suggesting the right things? Are we moving in the right direction for walking and biking based on all the things that we've heard from you over the last couple of years? And here's a link to the survey. I think it will be open. I think it'll be open for the next couple of days. So anybody who's on this call is encouraged to take it. If you haven't already, I think it will close within either a couple days or a week. I'll make sure that it stays open long enough to give you an opportunity to complete it. These are two different websites. I think the second one is the easiest way to get there. It's simply the city's website and then /FCF for Flagstaff Community Forum. And you should see active transportation survey there. There are also a number of other surveys that are open right now, which are you'd be encouraged to take as well, as long as you're in there. And then we've got an overall web page as well here, which is simply the city's website plus /ATMP if you want to see some of the information that we've compiled. And again, that brings me to the conclusion of my presentation. Again, I appreciate your time and attention. And now's the time if you have those difficult or uncomfortable questions for me, I'd be happy to stumble through an answer.
All right, thank you, Martin. Are there any other questions for him or on this presentation or on the draft plan? Not hearing any. Thank you again. That was great information, and I personally will say I look forward to participating in that survey and hearing more on how this advances. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, we are on to item B, which is the City Council's consideration and adoption of resolution number 2022-05 and ordinance number 2022-04. Before we go into that, I did just want to acknowledge the arrival of Karen Flores. And also, because I missed acknowledging this earlier, I wanted to also acknowledge the presence of Vice Mayor Becky Daggett. So thank you both for being with us today. And I will turn it over to Leah.
Thanks so much, Chair House. So I'm going to do a quick introduction. We have before you Jenny Neiman and Tiffany Ann Tall. Jenny is the Climate Program Manager and Tiffany is our Senior Planner. I know she's on the call too. They are going to be bringing in front of you an ordinance, which will be going to Council on March 1st. So we are asking our Housing Commission to make recommendations to City Council to the approval of this zoning code text amendment. And as you guys know, this falls directly in line with our housing plan under Create 5, which is explore regulatory efficiencies and cost-saving practices, and also preserve. There's a lot of overlap there to encourage the adaptive reuse of buildings. So I'm going to hand this over to both Jenny and Tiffany and let you guys have great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair House, and to Leah. And I'm just really excited to be here today. And Tiffany, as Leah said, is with me. I wanted to start out with just the congratulations. This commission is really incredible. And as a person who writes a lot of plans and climate plans, and I have been so deeply impressed by all of your work and this really important step forward for our community. So congrats to you all and thanks for your service. I am attempting to share my screen and sorry, it's going to be 1 second. My computer is quite slow today. Here we are. Okay. I want to confirm. It should be coming. Not there. All right. While it's still loading, I will go ahead and start. Again, thank you for having us today. Thank you, Leah, for getting us here on the agenda. We are going to council with us for a second read on Tuesday. And I'm just really grateful that we were able to get this in. We are looking forward to any feedback that the Housing Commission has on this item. Oh, shoot. Sorry. Oh, all right. Can I confirm that y'all can see my PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you so much, Chair House. So I'm going to do a little bit of background about the existing incentive and why we're changing it, as well as the proposed changes, and then Tiffany will round us out with the staff recommendation. The residential sustainability incentive is an incentive program. Our slides have changed a little bit because until last week, these were called the residential sustainable building standards. That changes in official, but council would like to change that name, which we're really excited about. When they were called the residential sustainability standards, it kind of implied that perhaps these were for everyone, right? That they were the building code. This is an incentive program. So now it's a little bit redundant, but it is an incentive program. The existing incentive provides a 25% density bonus to developers of new residential buildings. So this is multifamily as well as single family. The incentive requirements fall into 4 categories: water, transportation, waste, and energy efficiency. Traditionally, the energy efficiency requirement has been the core requirement of this incentive. The 3 prior were kind of seen as prerequisites, but the meat of it was really within that energy efficiency requirement. The energy requirement was that the buildings needed to achieve a HERS 50 rating. So HERS is a standard used for its home energy rating systems, and it's a standard. It really is 1 to 100, where the average home built, I think about a decade ago at this point, gets a rating of about 100. And so any improvement of that from 0 to 100, you can kind of rate it on that scale. We used to be at HERS 50, our building code for reference. There are multiple compliance paths in the building code for energy, but what we do require through the HERS program requirement compliance path is about a HERS 61 for our climate zone. 0 would be a net zero energy building. So that's the core requirement, and that's the HERS system. Why we are changing it. So the building code has caught up with some of our existing requirements. As I just said, the current incentive requires HERS 50. The building code is about a 61. In terms of transportation, the current incentive says to get this incentive, you must build, one of the options in transportation is you must have EV ready parking spaces. EV ready doesn't mean that you'll have the charging stations. It means you'll have the electrical infrastructure. And the reason we require that is we want our homes to be built ready for the future. The electric revolution in mobility is upon us. And while we might not all be there today, certainly in the next 10 and 20 and 30 years, which all of our homes that are built today will still be around, right? And 30 and 40 and 50 and 60 years, they will need electric charging. And so what we want to do is sort of future-proof our homes. So that's in the building code that you are EV ready. It's also in the incentive. So in some ways, our building codes have gotten a little bit too close to our incentive. This incentive is also not commonly used. We've been seeing use of it pick up a little bit recently, but it's not super well used, and we want it to be well used. We want to incentivize green building practices. The incentive also competes with the incentive for affordable housing, and I realize that many of you are likely very familiar with that incentive or are working on revising it. What we know and what we've heard from the housing folks is that because this incentive was getting easier and easier to achieve, right, as the code got even closer, it took away, in some ways, the rationale for folks to do the affordability incentive, right? We don't want one incentive to be much easier than the other, essentially. We don't want them to compete too much with each other. Finally, the incentive doesn't reflect the priorities of the carbon neutrality plan. I believe this incentive was passed in 2009 and hasn't been changed since then. So it didn't even incorporate our first climate plan that we adopted in 2018. I'm going to go through the amendments. These are sort of just 4 summary points. We're going to remove the HERS 50 energy efficiency standard. We're going to replace that with standards for all electric energy efficient buildings. There are third-party certifications that the builder can choose from to get there, but the key is really that we're trying for, instead of just efficiency, that we're trying for all electric and energy efficiency. We're also going to incorporate electric vehicle charging requirements. So this is not just the pre-wiring, this is actually the EV chargers. We're going to revise the waste requirements. And then this is really an administrative update that kind of talks about how we're going to do this. The planning director enters into an agreement with property owners that comply with this incentive. That is how they get the residential density bonus. So first, we've updated our purpose. Again, because the energy efficiency was really the core of this, the HERS 50 standard was in the purpose. And so we removed that and we've aligned it with the proposed revisions. In terms of the density bonus, it used to be so that you could, I think it was, use the incentive elements for water and transportation and energy on, or really on energy, on, let's say, half of the building units or a quarter. And then you would get a corresponding density bonus. So it might be 10% or 20%, not that full 25%. We have decided we want the whole building to be sustainable, and it's just more efficient anyways, right? We don't want different units designed differently in some ways. And so now it's the whole building will be in line with these requirements, and then you get the 25% density bonus. In terms of the sort of minimum standards, so water resource protection, we didn't do much to update this. We are trying to keep it consistent with the original intent of this incentive. We made an update that says it has to be all buildings within your residential development. Transportation and air quality, and Martin is a really huge partner of ours, and I got very excited about all the conversations that you all just had about transportation and equity and housing, because it's where I think we all have lots of in common, of the three-legged stool, I might say, of housing and transportation and sustainability. But so transportation and air quality, there used to be 3 options. The option that we've removed is that the house is, or the residential development is located within a quarter mile of a Foots trail. Our Foots trails are amazing. They're also all throughout the community. And so where a Foots trail is not exactly a good indicator of where we want development, right? And so, and we worked with Martin on that, right? Because Foots trails are almost everywhere, not almost everywhere, but really a lot of different places. It's just not as good of an indicator. What is a good indicator is transit, and we want folks to be able to have access to transit. And so this is an option. The developer has to choose one, has to comply with one or the other. So you can be located within a quarter mile of a transit stop, or you can provide electric vehicle charging stations. And this is not, again, just the pre-wiring. It needs to be a station that's accessible for residents to charge their cars. Again, the electrification of our mobility is something that we want to be accessible to all residents, right? There are so many benefits. There's cost benefits. At this point, we're already there in terms of cost benefits. I hope everyone is considering buying an electric car for their next vehicle, because you will save money. It's like buying gas for about $1.50 a gallon. And so we want that to be available to every member of our community. That's going to entail getting more and more EV charging stations into our housing, particularly into our multifamily housing developments. That's where we're seeing it's really tough, right, to make sure that our multifamily housing has charging. It's not very hard to put a plug in a garage, right? But once we start talking about apartment buildings and condos, it's kind of a different picture. So this incentive is a way for us to move forward on that. Finally, waste reduction and management. This used to have a number of kind of complicated requirements about, it's got to be gypsum board or all these things. We've decided to simplify this. We are now requiring a materials management plan. And in that materials management plan, there still are requirements to plan for recycling of all of our common materials. This is really for your ongoing operations. We will then require a construction and demolition waste management plan. That is, we still get in a gypsum board, and we still get into lumber and what scraps you can save if you're doing demo. But we're not including that in the code. And so we're simplifying the code while trying to maintain the standards. So the developer will need to submit those plans and just let us know about their plans. This is a pretty standard thing they're doing anyways. We just want to make sure that those are good plans and that they're going to be able to be implemented. Finally, so as I said, the energy efficiency elements are those that are really the core here. Before, again, we asked for a HERS 50 rating. That's an energy efficiency or energy use rating. Now we are asking for all buildings to be all electric. Electrification is a key way that we're going to get to carbon neutrality. And that basically means our homes need to run on electricity only, as opposed to most of our homes now run on electricity and natural gas, a combination, or electricity and propane in some cases. We need those to be all electric. The rationale behind this is that the electric grid is getting greener and greener. By 2050, we will have a 100% clean electricity electric grid, and that is APS's commitment. And it's also where the market is going anyways. And so if we can get our homes that we build today on all electric, it means that in 2050, those homes will be running on 100% carbon-free energy because they won't have these natural gas lines. And so that is really the really exciting thing and priority here. Along with that, we want to ensure energy efficiency. And so it's sort of this two-part thing. We don't want just all electric buildings because then it's like who gets stuck with the bill, right? Or if they're inefficient, we don't want our renters, right, or the eventual owners of a condo to get stuck with really high electric bills. And so these three options are three different ways that we're trying to ensure efficiency. So the first is an all-electric zero energy building. This is a hard option, and we are giving three options, and this one is a lot harder, but some people may be going for it, and we really want to call it out and encourage that. Zero energy buildings are defined by the Department of Energy. It will be verified by a third party, and this basically means that your home is consuming as much energy as it produces, which is a really cool thing. And what's really exciting is that these homes exist. They're wonderful. Some already exist in Flagstaff. It's kind of wonderful, and we want to encourage that. Second, an all-electric energy efficient building. So this is certified, the way we're calling it, the way we've defined that is certified to the bronze level of a National Green Building Standard. The National Green Building Standard is a national standard that has been set up by a third party. There's also verification, and getting to the bronze level is the lowest level, but it really means that this is a sustainable building. Be constructed to achieve building energy efficiency that's equal to or greater than a 15% improvement of our building's our city of Flagstaff's current energy code. And so this is just another check on that efficiency. So we're kind of doing it both with the NGBS standard as well as a 15% improvement over the code. And then I do want to note this option does allow an exception for all electric gas fireplaces in common areas or another small use of gas. We want to make sure that it's really minimal. It's not a huge contribution to gas at the development. We're not using these gas fireplaces for space heating. They are an amenity. And the reason here is we want developers to use this incentive, and we don't want this to be a turnoff, right? That they decide not to go with it just because of that. Finally, the third option, and again, these are just options under energy efficiency. The third option is that you get sort of a triple certification. So the Energy Star is a really well-used and well-known standard for energy. Indoor Air Plus label is also through the EPA. It is aligned with Energy Star, and often you get it through the same verifier and the same kind of certification timeline. And then finally, WaterSense. We are not requiring verification for WaterSense because there are not a lot of raters or verifiers in the Flagstaff area that can do this, and we didn't want that to be a barrier. Again, we want folks to be able to use this, and so they will need to meet the requirements, and we will verify that internally. Finally, this is about how this happens, and it's through a development agreement with the planning director and the property owner. We also added a definition. Electric vehicle supply equipment is a funny way to say EV chargers, but it's what the feds use. And so we've added that to the code. We wanted to keep our language consistent with them. Again, that is the charging station. I wanted to really quickly go through how this amendment furthers the strategies of the carbon neutrality plan. The first is equity. Again, we really want to take away that conflict with the housing incentive. We don't want folks to just take this one because it's much easier, right? Decreased dependence on cars. This relates to the development and ideally their location with transit, right? We hope that they choose that option, but if they don't choose that option, then they fall in line with our electric mobility requirement. So this is about helping folks transition to electric vehicles and getting those chargers in housing, particularly in multifamily housing. Clean electricity. So we don't specify solar in this code. However, solar is a big element of a lot of developers' energy plans, especially when they are trying to achieve a certain standard. And so we anticipate if it's a net zero building, they will have to have solar. If they use National Green Building Standards or Energy Star, both of those standards incorporate solar into their calculations for how you achieve the standard. Finally, building fuel switching, that is required for all options, that it be a building site that does not incorporate natural gas in a meaningful way. Finally, reduce building energy use. This is where we get the efficiency. Again, those two, building fuel switching and reduce building energy use, have to go together. And then sustainable consumption and waste management. We feel that the new waste requirements will, because they're a little bit cleaner and we'll be able to adjust them as needed, that they will help us to divert more waste from the landfill. I'm going to hand it over to Tiffany. These are really findings that were built for City Council, but we wanted to kind of present them to you. Tiffany.
I think we just wanted to make sure it was included somehow. So, but just these are the findings that need to be met for a zoning code text amendment. The first is that it has to be found consistent with the general plan and the applicable specific plan. Jenny has gone over the specific plan component. And of course, that follows true for the regional plan as well. So we've done a whole regional plan analysis and found it in conformance. We've also recently had a whole regional plan amendment done as well to support carbon neutrality, and that the proposed amendment would not be detrimental to the public interest, health, safety, welfare, or convenience. And of course, that's not our intention or aim here, but mostly to incentivize these sustainable features. And lastly, that the proposed amendment is consistent with other provisions of the code. So as an incentive, it should not conflict with other provisions of the code. And we believe that that incentive will meet the required findings. So the first version of this zoning code text amendment has gone to City Council. It has made it through its first read of the ordinance. We are hoping for the second read of this ordinance with some slight little changes here and there to happen on March 1st. So fingers crossed, hopefully we can answer any questions that you have on this amendment today.
All right, thank you both. We're going to open it up to comments and questions. I was made aware some of you may not have access to the chat to put a C or Q. So if you cannot, please feel free to raise your hand and I'll keep eyes out for your hand up. I do see Nicole, your hand, and then Adra.
Thank you, Chair. I have I have several questions, so if we could maybe take them on perhaps one at a time. I just wanted to recognize that this is probably going to be a dialogue with lots of questions. I would greatly appreciate that time, and I'll try to be cognizant of my time that I'm taking. So I am curious about the requirements of building within a quarter mile of a transit stop. Thanks to Martin, I pulled up his little CGIS map that he put the link into the system, and I'm only finding 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, maybe 8 or 9 developable areas that I can see just from this map that are within a quarter mile of a transit stop. So I just wanted to kind of better understand how this was a viable solution to qualify for these incentives to encourage development in Flagstaff.
Sure, thank you so much for the question. And Tiffany, feel free to add on if I could start. So first I want to clarify, this is actually part of the existing incentive. There used to be 3 options. So it was a quarter mile of a transit stop, a quarter mile of a foots trail, or electric vehicle readiness. This is an or. And so if you don't develop within a quarter mile of a transit stop, we know that that is a limited amount. And I want to emphasize too, this could be redevelopment. Right. It's not necessarily greenfield development, but if it's not within a quarter mile of a transit stop, we ask that you put in electric vehicle stations. So it's absolutely an or. And that's also, a quarter mile is about a 5-minute walk. And so we're trying to really emphasize the connection between housing and transit and having, transit available. But Tiffany, feel free to add on.
Yes, this is also an incentive we have in the zoning code for all projects. So if you are within a quarter mile of a transit stop, we allow you to do up to a 10% reduction. We actually find a lot of developments able to take advantage of this particular incentive. So that quarter mile is based on the activity centers. Those are the pedestrian shed of our activity centers located in the regional plan. And I would say 9 times out of 10, most developments are able to come within a quarter mile of a transit stop.
Okay, and I apologize. You said that they would qualify for a 10% reduction, and then I think my phone cut out. So what was that reduction in?
Total number of parking spaces.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. I think my phone cut out. Okay, and then again, just trying to better understand, I realize it's an or, so thank you for reminding me of that. But the requirement of electric vehicle charging, if you boil down the math, we have about 288 electric vehicles in Flagstaff. If we take the percentage of 4% for every 1,000 cars registered in the state of Arizona being electric, I would like to better understand how increasing costs for developers whose costs are already pretty high to build in Flagstaff, which is a huge deterrent for developers, how increasing those costs to require electric vehicle charging for 300 electric vehicles in Flagstaff that aren't necessarily projected to maximize the population in the near foreseeable future?
Sure, of course. I would be happy to respond. So absolutely. Electric vehicle use right now is low, and electric vehicles are generally driven by folks with higher incomes, right? Who are those early adopters right now? That is going to change. It's going to change very quickly in the next decade, as well as over the next couple decades. Our housing has to be built for the next 50 years. You guys would probably know better about average lifetime of housing, but we know that folks are going to be in electric vehicles more and more, and they're going to need the ability to charge at their home. Charging at your home is the least expensive place to charge. It's also the most convenient place to charge. And so most people who drive electric vehicles today, and what we're seeing across the country, is that home charging, sometimes work charging, is the way that people like to do it. It takes off a lot of stress. It becomes as automatic as charging your cell phone every night. And so, our housing must be built for electric vehicles, because those are the vehicles we all will be driving in the coming decades. And so there's a lot of reason there, just alone, right? Our housing has to be future proof, right? We don't want it to become obsolete. When we think about multifamily housing, again, we have challenges with that, just because, again, it's a lot easier to charge in a garage than it is in terms of thinking about multifamily housing. Electric vehicle charging stations are already being put in some housing developments today. The standard on Route 66 voluntarily put in electric vehicle charging stations. And so a lot of developments are actually seeing this as a benefit. Frankly, I wouldn't buy a house today in a condo development if it didn't have a charging station, and I don't have an electric car and probably won't for 10 years. But it is a really important marketing benefit to consumers, and will continue to be over time. Tiffany, I know you had something, feel free.
Oh yeah, that you did hit it. We have been negotiating for charging stations for quite some time on most of the cases that are coming for rezoning. So I mean, as many of you know, we work really hard trying to negotiate for the things we can't actually require in code. And so one of those things, it has been these charging stations, and we've been actually really successful, and we're finding that developers are willing to contribute this, and sometimes there are additional resources that developers can tap into. There are rebates and programs with APS as well for these charging stations to help reduce the cost, to also make it available to those who live in rental properties as well as home ownership opportunities.
Thank you. Do you have a ballpark estimate of what the increase in cost in that development, a multifamily, of course, for including vehicle charging stations, and maybe what those rebates, is it like a 20-80 split? I mean, because what I'm hearing, if I can speak frankly here, is we are increasing the costs for these developers, putting these requirements in for incentives to build here, which is going to drive up the cost of housing, which is completely ignoring housing commission's like driving force of solving the affordable housing issue. So I just would like to understand maybe what that ballpark increase in cost for the developer to build is, and then I have a second part to that question.
Sure. I do want to reiterate that these are incentives and that these are not requirements that are applied to development. So this is only if a developer wants to take advantage of a 25% density bonus. There are other places in the code where they can also achieve density bonuses. So we do have affordable housing incentives as well. Right now, the way that these incentives are written, they're so easy to obtain because it's essentially meeting our standard building codes. It makes it very easy for a developer to take advantage of this existing incentive, making it more competitive with the existing affordable housing incentive. So that's a big background on why this is also happening. But yes, all of these things do cost money. And I don't know, Jenny, if you have the cost of the charging station.
Yes, I do. So it really ranges. It depends. There are costs at about $5,000 per port, essentially, per those charging stations. It can be up to $40,000, right? Based on how many you're putting in, what the site looks like, what kind of level of charging infrastructure you can do. But at the end of the day, as Tiffany said, this is in exchange for a 25% density bonus. The nice thing about a density bonus is that it's also really good for sustainability, right? We're I think Councilmember Aslan put it, we are awarding a good thing with another good thing, right? And I know from the housing perspective, right, density is what we need. And so, yeah, I just think that's an important consideration. So again, as low as 5,000, but the cost can rise based on the site.
This wasn't the second part, but you raised an interesting question for me too. Can you maybe lobby a little bit more to help me for one, but mainly the Housing Commission understand why we would encourage an increased cost in development that would subsequently lead to a 25% density bonus, which we're all for because we want to increase housing, affordable housing in the community and not make it cost burdensome on them. So tell us why we should support this to increase that density bonus, because that's what they need to do to qualify, right? For a 25% density bonus is these ORs.
So currently the density bonus exists in the zoning code.
And you're trying to change that, right? So why would we, if it's so easy to obtain now, why would Housing Commission be for like in support of changing the code to make it more difficult and costly to obtain the 25% housing bonus?
So it's not meant to make it more difficult or more costly. It's meant to make it more meaningful. So it's meant to actually achieve what the carbon neutrality plan is trying to achieve. We also, if somebody did not want to go this route and add cost in terms of their development, there are other housing or other density bonuses available, including the affordable housing density bonus, which does give density bonuses. It actually allows a wider array of development incentives. So reduction of resource protection standards, reduction of development standards overall, density bonus increase. And those could potentially be more desirable for some developers to pursue. It makes the affordable housing incentive a little bit more competitive with an existing incentive. So basically, if you can get an existing incentive of 25%, just going with the straight building code, you're less likely to pursue those affordable housing options where we get an assured affordable housing product.
Thank you. Just two more, and I promise that's it. In a multifamily structure, who actually pays for the electricity that's used in the charging station? And forgive me for being dense and uneducated on how the charging stations work.
No worries. This is new for all of us. So it's up to the building developer. So a lot of apartment buildings across the country have already figured this out in some ways, right? They just have charging. You just have an account or you use your credit card. Most are done through a phone app. So you can go up to a charger. There's many in the city of Flagstaff already today. Use a phone app that has your payment, etc. It's really on a development by development, but there's lots of support services. The developer could provide it for free, right, to residents. I don't think that's what most people do, but that is one option, all the way to, they can charge, they can make a profit on it, right? They could charge more for the convenience, for the service. That's all up to it. We don't specify that in this incentive or in the code. We just want the stations to be there.
Okay. And then finally, and thank you all for your patience while I worked through this. You mentioned that APS is guaranteed, I didn't write it down, but they guaranteed a certain level of electricity. I just wanted to better understand and hope that we're taking into account that the infrastructure will be there on the draw on the power grid if your intention is to have everything running off of electricity in the next 8 years. That sounds like a pretty heavy draw on the existing electrical grid. So how are we going to ensure that the infrastructure is in place so that we don't experience that, that detrimental draw on the power grid?
It's an excellent question. And very happily, there are experts across the country working on this. Flagstaff is not alone in its electrification plan. Pretty much any city thinking about climate action of any type is thinking about this. And the national grid experts are preparing for it, are preparing for what this increased load is, right? Because it's not only kitchen appliances and your space heating as well as vehicles. And so APS is very prepared for this as well, or is preparing for it. I want to clarify, we will not be fully running on electricity by 2030. We want to get as close to we can as possible, but we know in 2030 we will have much, much, much further to go. And so while we have a 2030 carbon neutrality goal, there's going to be a lot of different sort of balancing that we do with our existing emissions. So yes, the goal, I apologize, is in 2050, so APS has committed to make their electric grid 100% clean electricity by 2050, and that is just a commitment that they have made. They'll probably get there sooner, frankly, but that is something that we are really looking forward to and are excited about their partnership there, and then really them leading the way as most other utilities across the country are also getting there. It's just where the market's going. Renewable electricity is already there, so that yes, that's where we're heading. And yes, it will be a bigger grid at that point, right, with more loads on it. But there are a lot of folks across the country thinking about that. And it's a big concern, frankly, and it's a very good point. But we think we'll be able to get there.
Thank you. And thank you, Tiffany, for taking the time to answer my questions and listen to my concerns. On to the next. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. We are on to Adra, and then Tyler, and then Karen.
Hello, everybody. I just had a couple questions. One, I remember early on we were talking about the ADUs. Well, I guess before I even start, I'd like to apologize. I had a class that I'm teaching at NEU, environmental movements, actually, and it just ended, so I'm a little late for the meeting. But I thought we were looking at increasing the size of ADUs. I know it was limited to 600 square feet, if I remember correctly. And I thought we were gonna change, I thought we had agreed to change the terminology to be like half the size of the main house or something along those lines. I didn't see anything in here. Can anyone kind of answer that one for me? Thanks.
I would be more than happy to answer that question. This is Tiffany. That zoning code amendment has already gone through. And we did increase the size of accessory dwelling units to 800 square feet in area.
Oh, okay. And why did we go to 800? Maybe, you know, I could have missed something and I apologize. I thought we were going to half the size of the main dwelling unit. Was there a particular reason we stuck with 800?
I'm not exactly sure. I apologize. I'm not the staff person that brought that particular text amendment forward. Um, and
I did see Dan Folk raise his hand. I'm not sure if Dan, did you have something to contribute to that question?
I do. So we amended the ADU regulations last calendar year. Dan's timer letter. Staff actually did not bring a recognition to change the size of the ADU. But during the adoption process, Councilmember Shimoni amended the amendment, made the change from the dais to 800 square feet. And I'm not sure how he came up with that number.
All right, I guess I can talk to Adam, see why he did that. Thank you, though. I appreciate it. All right, and the other thing I wanted to just to bring up in one of Nicole's comments, some of my work focuses on energy, and the most conservative estimates are about a third of cars in 2050 will be EV. My personal work, I think it's going to, a city like Flagstaff will go through a transition much faster, I think, than other places as they become much more mainstream and affordable. Because if you think about right now, there's hardly anything on the road from 30 years ago, and tons of new models are coming out, and it's just, especially with the price of gasoline, it's going to be kind of a no-brainer pretty soon. So I think it is really important that we do all we can to encourage people. So like somebody else brought up, that you don't want to be in a situation where only homeowners can have EVs, and anyone living in an apartment, you know, could theoretically be forced to sell their EV and get some old gas guzzler just so they can, you know, live in Flagstaff. So I think I'm impressed, and I'm you know, really positive about the idea of encouraging that. So that was just a comment. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Adra. We are on to Tyler.
Hi, thanks. Just a few questions I'll run through quick here. First, does the incentive, will it only apply to new buildings, or is it possible to apply to redevelopment or expansion of housing on an existing site? Or is that not even feasible in the first place? So that's why it's not mentioned.
thank you. So redevelopment really is considered new development. But it could be available to any project that wanted to go through this process. It's just whether or not it's going to be feasible to add units to a project to obtain the incentive.
Okay. Second question. I'm curious if there's a goal established around the incentive. So for the 10-year housing plan, there's a goal of 8,000 housing units created or preserved by 2031 with 10% affordable. Is there a similar goal with this incentive? For example, to have X percent of new developments take advantage of it? Yeah.
Thanks, Tyler, for the question. So we did not set a goal for the incentive. We have goals within the carbon neutrality plan. So like the housing plan, right? That is sort of where we set our goals. under those goals, we have goals about how many new homes we want to be built that are electrified and highly efficient, et cetera. How many, homes we want to be retrofitted with electrification, et cetera. And so those goals really live in that sort of policy document to help guide us. This incentive is just one way that we will get there, right? It's kind of a start. It was really good. We had this existing incentive, and so we're able to incorporate that in there. We will have to do much more work and many other, different policies, different programs, encouragement, and education in order to get there for the rest of that. But no, we don't set specific goals around use of our incentive.
Okay. I think it may be good to look into that because, as I'm sure you're well aware, the difficulty with these incentives is setting the balance right. If the cost of the developer is too high, then no developer is going to use it. And then there's not really any point in making an incentive policy that no one uses. And I think this was actually mentioned during city council that you guys do kind of revisit and review these incentives periodically to ask yourselves, is this working? But without a goal in mind, how do you know if this incentive is working? Like if 2 developers use it in the next 2 years, is that a success or is that a failure?
It's a really good question, Tyler, and I do appreciate it. I was just thinking, yeah, we probably need to look into that. And I think, as we discussed with council last week, we're going to be doing some pretty vigilant incentive, monitoring of this, right? Again, we have to figure out, right, what is that perfect balance, to get this used, but not be giving too much away, right? And so we will definitely be monitoring it. I think staff can work on that internally and essentially have an idea of what, by the time we get to that 1-year review, even, right, what we want to kind of see, how we want to see that change in the coming years, et cetera. Thank you for that suggestion.
Okay. And
just as an add-on. Oh.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to add on to Jenny. To Jenny. Since this incentive has been in the code since the code was adopted in 2011, and since then it's been used 3 times in its current situation.
Okay. So it had only been used 3 times before. Okay.
That's correct. It's been sort of a little hidden gem, and staff has been trying to utilize this incentive.
Was the incentive previously also 25%?
It was a scaled incentive going up to 25%.
Okay. Because if the incentive wasn't used very much before, and it also wasn't very hard to reach, like you made that point that building code was already close to it. If you're making the incentive harder to achieve, wouldn't the density bonus need to also go up in order to make it more likely for developers to use it?
So in a lot of ways, the incentive did go up. But what I would tell you, Tyler, is that I think the incentive wasn't used as much, more because people were unaware that it was there. And so I think there's an advocacy that has to occur. And now that Jenny has really joined the team and with her planning efforts, she's joined our IDS team. She's making comments on every development case, same way that housing does. We're doing a much better job at advocating for these types of improvements.
Okay. And last question, which is just more about the nature of how these incentives work or how these efficiency improvements work. Do the efficiency improvements in the incentive not pay for themselves over time? So my naive understanding was that the decrease in utility costs meant that the efficiency improvements actually have a positive ROI over a certain time frame. But if it has a positive ROI, then I would expect the developers to do this regardless of whether there is an incentive for it. So yeah, I'm just curious to understand, like, how does these efficiency improvements factor into the cost of development and the cost of maintaining and powering the building over time?
Thank you, Commissioner Dunham. Yeah, it's a really good question. There is positive ROI for energy efficiency, right? Energy efficiency is one of the oldest tricks in the book, right? That everyone can get behind. Yet we see that due to financing models, due to developer knowledge, due to a number of things, we don't see folks take the most efficient route, even though we have the numbers that they'll get payoff from it. And so I think if you can crack that code, excellent. We know that it's going to take encouragement, that it's going to take education, that it's going to take incentives. What we're really excited about with this incentive, with getting some more all-electric buildings on the books that are also really efficient, is that we'll be able to have these showcase properties, right? To be able to show the community, to show developers, right? To show our partners in all of these goals, both housing and sustainability, hey, this can happen, right? And hey, you do see the ROI. You know, there's kind of mixed incentives too, though, right? If the developer is investing up front, there is a higher upfront cost to many of these things. You know, sometimes the owners, right, or the tenants down the line, if they're the ones paying the utility bills, they are the ones that see the benefits, right? So you have some cases of mixed incentives. I'm sure someone much smarter than me has done a ton of research on this and how we work on those mixed incentives, but that's one of the reasons, right, why we're there. And so you're right, we ideally would see more of this in the market, but we're hoping that through this, getting people through the door, we can demonstrate those cost savings. And we can demonstrate, you know, if we kind of change our systems. One other thing is that this is new, right? High efficiency cold temperature heat pumps, which do have a good return on investment for even cold places like Flagstaff. There's not a lot of knowledge yet out there, right? It's really only been in the past decade that we have seen those gains and efficiencies in those heat pumps. And so that's one big part of it, right? We just need to help everybody get updated on the best way to build a house.
Okay, thank you. And I'll cut myself off there out of respect for everyone else's time. I think there's a couple other people lined up.
All right, thank you, Tyler. I'm just reading a message that I got here really quick, so 1 second. But Karen, I believe you are up.
Great, thank you. A couple questions. My first being, when you say multifamily, you clarify you're defining condos, apartment buildings. Is that what that definition is?
The definition of multifamily is any project with 4 or more units.
Okay, so is all of this incentive also for, you know, if someone wants to build an apartment complex, then if they want higher density, they can also get this incentive if they provide the electronic vehicle stations or electric vehicle stations? Am I understanding that the same way as if it was a single family?
So this incentive, the way it would be applied is specifically to multifamily. For multifamily, for example, if your maximum density was 10 units an acre, then this would allow you at that 25% increase of basically 2.5 additional units, so 3 more units. And that's if you provide something out of each of the 4 categories that we presented.
Okay, so let's just say it's a 10-unit property. What would they have to provide to be in compliance with the incentive? Like if they were going to go with providing something along the electric vehicle perspectives.
So they would have to provide something in the first category had to do with water conservation. Likely they could choose to go with a no oasis zone, which is not very expensive. A no oasis zones means they would not include sod or grass in their development. Then they would choose between electric vehicle stations or being located within a 1/4 mile of a bus stop. Then from there, they would pick an energy efficiency, and they would also prepare a waste management plan for how they would deal with recycling.
And if they are not within a 1/4 mile of a transit stop, they had to provide charging stations. What is the requirement of how many they would have to?
So it depends on the parking. So the, I can pull it up real quick. I apologize. So if you have between 1 and 50 spaces, which is what a development of 10 houses would fall into, if right now, as it's written, is that it would be 1 space. However, at their meeting last week, council actually wanted more electric vehicle charging stations, and so it would be 2. The reason why this isn't actually a huge change is most charging stations are built with 2 spaces, right? It's kind of like a parking meter, right? It at the charging station goes in between the 2 spaces, and so it's very easy to go to 2. And so this development would provide 2 charging stations, or 2 charging spaces, which would likely be 1 charging station for that development.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around. It makes a lot of sense when it's a single family residence and you're obviously providing a charging station for that residence, and or the ability to have it plugged into their house, whatever that situation may be. But as you increase units, then it's like you're not meeting, if we're trying to make it carbon neutral and every car is supposed to be electric, how do you charge all those cars if you don't have enough charging stations?
It's a great question. Again, we're really trying to find a balance between, in how we prepare for this readiness, right? We want to make sure that there are at least a couple, right? The good news is a lot of people don't have to charge every night. Some people charge just once a week, right? And so I really appreciate the question, right? How do we do that? If there's 10 spaces, how do they do that? We feel that this ratio is kind of a balance between, requiring what we think we'll need in the future and, what some folks may say we don't need any right now. But again, not everybody charges every night. It really depends on your commute. Most electric vehicles that are being produced today get around at least 200 miles per charge. And so if you think about how much you drive in a week, some people drive 50 miles in a week, right? Some people drive 400. So maybe they have to charge every other night. But we do think that, 2 will at least be a start. If the developer wants to put in more, we would absolutely welcome that.
I appreciate you helping me wrap my head around that. I do just want to kind of tag on to what Nicole's concerns were, being in the mortgage side of things and seeing how the cost of homes just keeps increasing, and there are continually additional things that builders and developers are required to do when they build homes, and to add one more thing that's going to increase costs is concerning from my perspective. I know this is a goal that a lot of people have, and it's, being carbon neutral is important, but it comes at a cost, and I know doing it sooner than later is important, but I think we're going to increase our affordable housing availability quite a bit. So just wanted to share that comment.
All right, thank you. I see we have a comment from Commissioner Davis. Before that, I just want to note that we are getting close to a 15-minute mark for the end of our scheduled meeting time. We had one more presentation that was going to be given today, but they have agreed to switch that to an email presentation for us so we can continue this important conversation. But I also just want to be mindful with ongoing comments and questions of the time we may need to discuss what our recommendation would be. So please go ahead, Commissioner Davis.
Thanks. So I think kind of for the general public at large, myself included, I think the idea, the concept of sustainability for building is great. I think the challenge, as Nicole and Karen have pointed out, is those initial costs that we're talking about, it's really hard to grasp that. And I think once again, just even for the public who is struggling even to find housing and then to find it affordable, and then all of a sudden the costs are increasing for them for gas versus all electric, and then also once again even just with the charging stations. And I think kind of a challenge that I would present to you guys is maybe how you can present and show how those initial costs can be saved over time. I think that's the real challenge here.
I just want to say thank you. It is absolutely our challenge. It is, again, we have a big sort of ship to turn, and education and engagement. We're working right now on a whole sort of community conversation and education about electrification, right? And what are the benefits? What are the cost savings benefits, the health benefits, et cetera? So I really appreciate the comment, and yes.
Commissioner McLaughlin?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the presentation today. I too have some concerns about the upfront additional costs that electrification causes to housing prices, whether they're rental or ownership. But I also wonder what sustainability section's response is to what I believe is an increased cost for utilities to go to electric. Just looking at the utility allowance put out by our Flagstaff Housing Authority, if you converted heating, cooking, and water heating from a gas source to an electric source, that increases the utility cost by $85 a month for a 2-bedroom and $117 a month for a 3-bedroom. Just on their utility allowance schedule. Like, this isn't me making anything up. And so it's not just an upfront cost, it's an ongoing cost. And I wonder about impacts to affordability from that perspective.
Thank you so much, Chair McLaughlin. And I just want to clarify, in terms of the FHA's numbers, are those if they've made upgrades to, I'm not familiar with those numbers, so I apologize. Is that about if they made upgrades to their equipment? And if all of the equipment was upgraded to electrification?
No, this is simply going from your typical utility allowance for a 2-bedroom apartment, condo, a townhome, if the source of the heating is electric versus the source of the heating being natural gas. So do your upgrades that you're requiring here reduce energy consumption by 20%? So that way the cost of electric would be 20% less than what the average is, and then your increase wouldn't be as much? Or how does that work? Because electric by its nature is more expensive.
Sure, absolutely. And yes, now I understand the question. So we find that, and they found across the country, even in cold climates, that if you build today and you use all electric, it is a cost savings, even on an ongoing basis. That is due to the efficiency of the equipment, and mainly due to high efficiency cold weather heat pumps. Oh, all right, sorry, Sarah, I didn't see that. Feel free to jump in. And so that is really just about the equipment. It's about more efficient equipment. And so we are not projecting that new homes will end up with higher costs. That is something we're very, very cognizant of, and we want to continue to make sure. On the retrofit side, we're not quite there yet. It's hard to get the cost savings in the same place because of the retrofit side, and that's just because it's more expensive to retrofit houses, as I'm sure you all are familiar with. And so we're not quite there, but on new homes, yeah, we are finding that it makes a ton of sense financially to go ahead and electrify from the start. I'll also say it's really significant when you can get rid of another utility, right? And so right now we have found, we've done the math on homes in Flagstaff, that if they are only using, let's say, natural gas for their furnace right now and not for their hot water heater, that means that they're paying for the natural gas utility for, let's say, 6 months out of the year that they're not actually using it, right? They're getting a monthly bill with, them being on that network for 6 months out of the year. So in that case, we are actually finding that retrofits in Flagstaff do make sense. But that's not the case for all retrofits. But we are finding that, yes, in cold weather climates, even that new construction with all electric does lead to lower upfront costs as well as lower ongoing.
And so then if somebody was doing both the sustainability incentive and an affordable housing incentive on a rental development, maybe this is a question for the housing authority, what would they have to do to show that these increased utility costs aren't accurate? Because they would have to stick with the higher utility allowance and get less money if they were trying to do an affordable project as well, because you'd have to lower it based on the utility allowance.
I see Sarah has raised her hand. So Sarah, did you want to speak to that?
I will. Thank you so much, everyone. My name is Sarah Jarn, Housing Director for the city, and have the distinct pleasure of overseeing both areas of housing for the city, including the housing authority. And the utility allowances are based on a retrospective of the past, I believe it's 3 years. So ultimately, those amounts would shift as shifts are made. The rent calculations and utility calculations are off of a worksheet where the utilities are identified within the rent. It's different. Let me back up. We have something called fair market rent. Fair market rent is a HUD established number allowing how much can be charged relative to a Section 8 voucher. The difference between what most of us think of as rent and fair market rent is that utilities have to be included in that fair market rent level. When we're calculating if something fits within that fair market rent, we check off, is it electric, is it gas, what are the utilities in it, and then they apply the amounts provided within the charged within those parameters according to HUD. And so we get certain reports every year to check on what our utility allowances are, how they're calculated, and do we need to apply any modifications in addition to what HUD has applied. It will take a number of years for those two things to get side by side and could potentially impact the viability of vouchers over time. But I think it would, because it is a retrospective, it would ultimately wash itself out as places that are newly built as the utility allowances catch up to there. So I think that it's both valid points. The what do we do for this side, and what about sustainability, where we're really working towards the and we could, if push came to shove, petition HUD to point out the changes within the utility costs relative to our community, but it will take a number of years to get to that point so that we can define what those differences are.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, I'm done.
Thank you. I did see Commissioner Parafiniuk, your hand was re-raised. And then I did want to just remind us that we then will need to have a conversation about what our recommendation would be. So if we can transition to that after this last question, unless I see Commissioner Karen, your hand is still raised. I wasn't sure if you had another question or if that was from prior. So just let me know in the comments if you can.
Hey, yeah, I think, you know, I was just kind of thinking about some of like the numbers for housing, and I mean, right now, housing in the last 5 years has more than doubled, you know, of from a $300,000 house to like a $600,000 house. And so I know we're getting, I know sometimes we're a little worried, like, are you gonna put, you know, we're gonna add a little more here, a little more there, but so many of these things, I know on the home ownership side, when you have these, you're long-term going to save people money. So most of these long-term will save people money. You know, if they have a charging station, you know, that'll long-term save somebody money compared to having to pay gas every month. So many of these things that seem like there is a little bit upfront cost, long-term, you're actually lowering the monthly bills of people of lower incomes. And so I just wanted to kind of chime in and give you that little fun fact. That's all. I know we got to move it along. So thank you.
Thanks, Adra. I see, Tyler, you had a comment about recommendation, so let's move on to that discussion.
Yeah, actually a question. So does our recommendation have to be a simple yes or no, we recommend it? Or could it be a recommendation with a bit of extra commentary? And what I mean by that is I personally think the incentive is laudable and I want developers to use it, particularly so that we get that extra 25% housing. But I think the concerns that some of the council members had about costs are true, are correct, and a priori, it's hard to know whether the incentive is big enough for developers to take it, given the cost of conforming to the incentive. So is there some kind of compromise position where we say, yes, we recommend this, but we want city staff to check back in on this after a certain time period and adjust the incentive if it's not being used?
I want to defer to Chair House and Leah and Sarah, but yeah, I believe the commission can, yeah, we would love your feedback. That is why we are here. So feedback is excellent and we can take that. You know, yeah, yes.
So thanks, Jenny. I will also defer to Leah and Sarah. The agenda notes that that staff is seeking a recommendation from the Housing Commission, but is this really aiming just for feedback, or are we looking to make an actual recommendation to council?
Either. We would love both. It could be a recommendation with this feedback. From my perspective, and again, I want to defer to the staff. Yeah, we would love both, but if y'all aren't comfortable, you know, making a recommendation and just want to provide feedback, that's fine too.
Chair
I can,
House.
you got it, Sarah. Thanks.
Leah and I think we're backside rock, paper, scissors. Leah, go ahead. Sorry.
I think she said go ahead. It was in and out. This is Leah, and Sarah can add to this. I know that when sustainability came in front of the council the same day that we were presenting our plan, they wanted to provide recommendations. They wanted to be a part of the process. So that's why we have sustainability here today in making those recommendations, and we hope that they'll take those back to council next Tuesday and continue the partnership moving forward. And then I'll hand it to Sarah. I know she's transitioning devices.
I'm with Leah. We're here to take whatever message that you would like to share with City Council back to them, as I know Jenny will do in her presentation to Council next week. And so it's really where is the commission? We as staff did not want to put you into a spot. That's not our place. We want to know from you where you are. If you're not comfortable making a recommendation, are there things that would get you there, or are there things that you feel are, for lack of a better term, fatal flaws? We're really here to seek your feedback.
Okay, thank you both. So then I'd like to just have us, if you can put C or Q or raise your hand for a comment on just your thoughts and what you would like to send back to council from this discussion. Whether you are comfortable moving forward with a recommendation or if you would prefer to move forward with feedback. I see Adra, your hand is still raised. Was that from prior, or did you have other feedback here? Adra, are you there? I'm going to go to then Commissioner Elman.
Thanks, Chair. While I agree we need to be prepared and ready for the future, I mean, I've spent my entire life waiting for the other shoe to drop, the proverbial shoe. I think you're taking a gamble. I think you're taking a huge costly risk on making these things requirements for incentives that contradict this commission's movement and energy and focus and passion. I want to commend you, Jenny, for your passion and drive and how you create buy-in when you speak. It's very compelling and very exciting to watch. But I can't get on board with this. I think the city itself has declared too many emergencies, and they need to prioritize which is most important right now. Sitting on the Housing Commission, watching the huge snowfall that just happened and realizing how many unsheltered, unhomed folks who may have had an adverse reaction to that climate and that weather, when we could be doing real things here to house those people, to get them in homes as they are and safe from the elements, and pride in does anybody else hear that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And pride in that homeownership and just getting them stable housing will do wonders for them. But I think our focus right now needs to be housing and the safety of those individuals. That's something that we can work on locally. I think climate, because there's so much external forces from outside of Flagstaff, within the city or within the county, I don't know how we can solve carbon neutrality just in the teeny tiny little town of Flagstaff. Sorry, that's a no recommendation from me.
Thank you. And Commissioner Davis?
Yeah, what I would like to see is a rewording of the recommendations to where it's more of a collaboration of sustainability and affordability. I'm not a hard no on it. I just feel that right now they're competing, and maybe it's the concept, but I think we're coming at it from different points of view, and instead of trying to figure out some way to have it come together, it just seems like the idea or the concept of sustainability and affordable housing don't seem to align with each other. And I think that's the challenge. I truly believe that there's ways that can happen, but I don't think that the way it's worded right now, I kind of like Nicole, I'm not seeing that. And I think that's the challenge.
Thank you. Commissioner Denham?
Hey, I'm willing to recommend because from a housing perspective, I want developers to get that extra 25% bonus. It doesn't sound like it's going to impact, it's going to add a cost to all developments because it is optional. But again, I am worried that with the cost, developers may end up not taking it. So I recommend it, but I want that message to also go to council that they need to check back in down the line to make sure that the cost isn't too much to the developer relative to the incentive. And if needed, they need to increase the housing density bonus in order to make it financially feasible to developers. So I recommend, with that message, hopefully also given to council, I would recommend.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions, or statements on your recommendation or not recommending? I see Commissioner McLaughlin.
I guess my big question is, I'm trying to say this in a better way, but I guess I wonder, so what? So what does the commission recommend? Because it feels like the presentation to us and the conversation is happening way late in the process. It's already gone to council. It's already gone to sustainability. We already have a first read. So the second read happens in 3 business days. It feels like housing is an afterthought. and the impact of the sustainability policy on housing cost is an afterthought. And so I mean, the recommendations or the feedback from this commission will go back to council. I don't know what that does, I guess, if anyone has any thoughts on that.
I'll watch to see if anyone else raises their hand to speak to that, but I'll just say for my own part, I had similar thoughts, Devana. Just in terms of, I think my concern at this point is the fact that this is going back before council in, as was just said, 3 business days. I am leaning towards, I think we need to provide this feedback rather than a recommendation, because at this point it's already so far in motion that a recommendation, I don't know that we're going to, well, certainly we don't have time right now to go into a full conversation. And it would have been beneficial to have had this conversation earlier so that we could have come with a more solid recommendation at this point. I see Commissioner Parafiniuk, and I apologize in advance if I am saying that incorrectly. I've been nervous about it all this time, so tell me if I'm getting it wrong, but please go ahead.
You know, with a name like H. Paraphinic, anything that gets close to that is, I will answer to Adam, Aaron, Adrian, Paraphinic. So no worries. But I just wanted to say that I think we do need to keep in mind that we are not adding costs to anybody because this is optional. At no time is it adding costs, and I think it's just kind of this idea like, oh, you want to add in a few more places, well, and make more money, you know, kind of per square foot of land. Why don't you also spend a little bit to make this more sustainable? And I think that's kind of a fair trade-off. And so those are my thoughts. And I would be recommending.
Thank you very much. I saw Sarah, was your hand up?
It was. If the commission isn't comfortable, then that can be the recommendation. You can state that you would like more time and consideration. You would like to better understand how things are interrelated. I don't want the commission to feel rushed, and that's exactly where you are, and that's not really where, as staff, we would want you to be. And so if that's the feedback to council, I do know, it's not that I think, I do know that recommendations do matter to council. That's why they created commissions. That's why the Housing Commission was specifically created in 2019 in order so that council had a voice of other people interested in that they could hear from besides staff, because we're really limited. We don't have opinions necessarily. We have work programs. So I think it is very important that you feel that your recommendations are genuine. And if your statement is, we need more time, or we would like to see something reflect the and that we keep trying to get to so that it's not or, then that's absolutely acceptable.
Thank you for that. And I saw Tiffany, your hand is up.
Yeah, I also just wanted to give a little background as well as why we sort of ended up here where we are, and take responsibility. So, you know, I took over this zoning code amendment just recently in January in pursuing and processing this application. This kind of jumped up at us due to a project that recently received its entitlements in June of last year. That project is dependent basically on this amendment, and so that's what pushed it forward. And that's what sort of caused this momentum and this this push towards getting this incentive updated. So one of the things as we've been going through current planning cases, you know, there is this push for all electric projects, and we've had now a couple of projects come through. But I just wanted to let you know that it is really, with all of the things that we have going on, it was really a project generated need. That's what it was. So just wanted to let you know this was actually something that would generate it out of current planning and not sustainability necessarily. Sustainability stepped up to assist us in getting this project through its hoops.
Thank you. I realize you can't see me nodding my head, but thank you for that information. I see, Jenny, your hand is up. I just want to acknowledge that we are 5 minutes past our time. I appreciate those who are able to stay, and we actually really need you to stay so that we maintain our quorum as we come to a final decision on what we're going to do moving forward. So please give us a little bit more time. And Jenny, if you'd like to go ahead and share.
Sure. Thank you, Chair House. And really, I just wanted to reiterate first what Sarah said. You know, we don't, you know, if the commission doesn't feel good about it, they can ask council to delay, and that's okay. And, you know, that can be your recommendation. And also, Tiffany took lots of blame, but this is on us, and we should have come to y'all sooner. We absolutely know that. Yeah, we've had some staff changes. There's been some things happening, but we do really look forward to your feedback and do believe council will take it to heart. So thank you for the consideration and the good conversation. This is deeply important.
Thank you very much. I have a suggestion, and I'd love feedback, or if someone would like to move forward with the suggestion, then just making the motion. And my suggestion is simply that we move forward with the statement that we are not comfortable making a recommendation at this time and would request more time to consider this. I'm hearing several no's on making a recommendation, recommendations to move forward with revisions, or some who are comfortable moving forward. But because we are at the time that we're at, and this is where we are in the conversation, I think it would just be beneficial to us to have more time to consider this before making any sort of formal recommendation, and just requesting that we could move forward with that request to delay and have more time. I did see Commissioner Kellogg's statement that she was a no on making a recommendation, and just wanted to verify, was that that you are a no on the full thing, or you were just wanting more time? Please go ahead. You can unmute.
Sorry, I had to wait for it to unmute. I definitely don't want to come into this committee with a preconceived notion or a set mindset. But one of the things I did take away from this so far is what was just said about this being project driven. So if I'm understanding correctly, we are trying to push this through as quick as possible because a project has already been proposed with the incentive that they're trying to push through. Is that correct?
So yeah, I'm happy to fill you in. We had a development project by the name of Aura. It came through. It's using both the affordable housing incentives and the sustainable building incentive. They also agreed to do their project at 100% electric. We can't meet the HERS 50 standard, so they won't be able to meet. We can't meet the HERS 50 standard and be all electric. So in that case, we won't be able to give them the density bonus for the
Okay. So yeah, I am a definite no on making a recommendation. And I personally see some just concerning issues with what was presented today. That's it.
Thank you. Commissioner Elman?
Thanks, Chair House. If I may, I would like to move that we make it clear that the Housing Commission is not ready to make a recommendation, whatever that may be, and need further information and discussion at this time before we can move forward.
This is Eric Davis. I would second that.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
I believe the motion carries, but Leah, correct me if I'm wrong. Do we need a full?
Actually, Chair, if you could do a count by attendance, that would be great. Thank you.
Great. Give me 1 second to get into the attendee list. So, Adra.
Nay.
Devana.
Sorry, mute button. I think it's I to vote in favor of not having a recommendation, right?
Correct.
Then I.
Eric.
Aye.
Sandy. Sandy, you're muted. I will circle back to Commissioner Flores. Jackie.
Aye.
Karen Flores. Karen, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you if you spoke.
Aye.
Thank you. Nicole.
Aye.
Tyler.
Aye.
And I am an aye. So that was 7 ayes, 1 nay.
Chair House, will you circle back to Commissioner Flores, please?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Apologies. Sandy Flores. Sandy, do you have the ability? I'm sorry, what was that, Sarah?
I was just thanking you for circling.
Okay.
You can pass.
All right, so that motion does carry. Thank you. All right, let's, so for the rest of our agenda items, we did decide that we'll circle back on the remainder of those items via email for the updates from housing staff and any other further information for the sake of time. I want to thank folks. This was not an easy conversation by any means, but it was certainly an important one. So I'm thankful to you all for sticking around and thank you for engaging with this important topic. And with that, I will adjourn us at 3:13 p.m. and thank you all again.
Bye.
Thank you.